Okay, so now that we are familiar with simplifying radicals and we know how to find the square root, so we're going to start with the quadratic equation of the form, which is ax squared plus c equals 0. So what you need to notice here is that there is no, I'm going to make a little note of this, there is no bx. So meaning that there's never going to be an x by itself. We cannot solve a quadratic by using square roots if there is an x in our equation. We would solve that by factoring. So we're just going to skip that part. Okay, so here's the steps. The first thing we're going to do is isolate x squared. So the isolate means get x squared by itself. Okay, so we're going to get it by itself, just like we do when we solve equations and we get x by itself. We're going to get x squared by itself. So then we have x squared equals something, and we're going to take the square root, which is this sign, of both sides. So we're going to have x squared under a square root and then something else, and we're going to take the square root of both sides. Then we're going to simplify the radical and place a plus or minus to indicate both answers. So every answer is going to have a plus or minus in front of a number or in front of the radical. All right, let's look at some. Okay, so here we have x squared minus 64. All we're going to do is move the 64 over here. And you guys all know how to do that. You add 64 to both sides, just like we do when we're solving equations. So now we have x squared equals, because those cancel out, 64. Now we're simply just going to take the square root of both sides, and we get x, because the square root of x squared is just x, equals 64 is a perfect square, and the square root of 64 is 8. Okay? And then we're just going to add that plus or minus in front. So x equals plus or minus 8, which is just saying that x can equal 8, or x can equal negative 8, plus or minus. Okay? So again, it's just like solving equations, except for we're going to take the square root at the end so we can get x by itself. All right, let's look at the next one. 7x squared plus 8 equals 15. We always want to do what's furthest away from our x, so we're going to subtract 8 from both sides, and we get 7x squared, so that cancels out, equals 7. Now, just like we would if x was by itself, we're going to divide by 7 to get rid of that 7. So now we have x squared equals 1. We're going to take the square root of both sides, and we get x equals, and the square root of 1 is always 1. And we're just going to add that plus or minus in front of it. So x equals plus or minus 1. And again, what that's saying is that x equals 1 or x equals -1. Either one would work. But it has to have that plus or minus. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more with you and then let you try some on your own. Here we have 81x squared plus 5 equals 21. I want to get rid of my 5 first, so let's move my 5 over. Now I have 81x squared equals 21 minus 5. I just drew a blank. 16. And now we're going to divide both sides by 81. And we get x squared, that cancels out, equals, and I'm just going to leave this as a fraction, 16 over 81. Just go with it for right now. Take the square root of both. So I'm going to take the square root of 16 and of 81. So I have x squared, the square root of x squared is x, equals the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 81 is 9, and I'm going to put that plus or minus in front. Sorry, that's my dog barking. Okay. Let's try one more. Sometimes we might have to simplify. Let's look at number 5. I'm going to add, I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Okay. And I get 2x squared equals 64. Divide both sides by 2. X squared equals 32. Take the square root of both sides. And I get x equals radical 32. Now, I can break radical 32 down. I can simplify that. Because 16 times 2 is radical 32. So now I have x equals radical 16 times radical 2. X equals the square root of 16 is 4. I can't simplify radical 2. So I bring that down. And then all I need to do is add my plus and minus in front. So now I have x equals plus or minus 4 radical 2. And that's my answer. So sometimes you might have to simplify the radical if you can. All right, I'm going to do one more with you, number 9, because it's been a while since we've dealt with fractions, but it's no different than what we used to do. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and subtract 1 minus 1 minus 1. And now we have negative 1/2 x squared equals negative 40. I want to get rid of this 2 right here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 2. So that way I can get rid of the negative and the 2. And I'm going to end up with x squared equals 80. Take the square root of both sides. X equals radical 80. Now I'm pretty sure we can simplify radical 80. So I'm going to simplify that into 8 times 10. And I'm going to break that down into x equals radical 16 times radical 5. X equals 4 radical 5. And I put my plus and minus in front, and that's my answer. X equals plus or minus 4 radical 5. Okay, so that only leaves you with 4 to do on your own. I would like for you to do those 4 on your own. It is very important that you show your work, because I am not going to count it if you do not show your work. You cannot do this in your head. So if you're not showing your work, that is telling me that you're using something else, an app or something, to solve these problems for you. If you do not show your work, you will not get credit. So finish these 4 and submit them. And there's a practice day 1 and a practice day 2 that go along with this. Let me know if you have any questions.